Deep beneath the Giza Plateau, below the most studied monuments on Earth, a recent scientific scan has detected something that should not exist. Using advanced radar, a team of researchers claims to have mapped a colossal underground complex. A network of tunnels stretching for over a kilometre, connecting 8 enormous vertical shafts. Shafts that plunge down twice the depth of the Eiffel Tower, terminating in 2 gigantic chambers, each large enough to swallow a cathedral whole. For centuries, we've believed the pyramids were tombs, their secrets confined within their stone walls. But what if the pyramids are merely the capstones? What if the true wonder of Giza isn't what rises into the sky, but what descends deep into the earth? Tonight on The Sleepy Explorer, we journey into these incredible claims. We'll examine the shocking radar images, confront the fierce denials from mainstream archaeology, and explore the ancient legends of a lost hall of records this discovery might finally validate. Prepare to look beneath the surface. We begin. In the early months of 2025, a stir of excitement rippled through the communities of archaeology and alternative history. A team of researchers, spearheaded by Professor Corrado Malanga from the University of Pisa and Dr. Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde, made an announcement that they described as a groundbreaking discovery hidden deep beneath the Giza Plateau. This interdisciplinary group, which had the backing of their respective universities, operated under the name CAFRI Project. Malanga and Biondi put forth the extraordinary claim that they had successfully used advanced radar scanning technology to map a truly vast subterranean complex located directly under the famous pyramids of Giza. The methodology they employed was at the forefront of remote sensing technology. They utilized a technique known as synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, Doppler tomography. This process involved harnessing satellite radar signals and applying new, innovative processing techniques to detect structures buried deep within the Earth. The team explained that by analyzing the microscopic vibrations in the ground a constant, natural tremor caused by the Earth's seismic background hum, they were able to effectively see to a staggering depth of nearly 700 meters, or about 2,300 feet, below the surface. This depth was significantly greater than what conventional ground-penetrating radar systems could achieve. To accomplish this, the researchers gathered data from orbiting radar satellites, specifically Italy's Cosmo Sky Med constellation and the satellites of Capella Space. They then processed this data using special algorithms that had been developed by Dr. Biondi, which allowed them to generate three-dimensional tomographic images of the world that lies beneath Giza. The question, of course, was, what did they report finding? According to the interpretations of Malanga, Biondi, and their colleague Dr. Armando May, the radar tomograms revealed a truly massive underground system concealed beneath the plateau. The team held a press briefing on the 16th of March, 2025, where they unveiled the highlights of their alleged discovery. Among their claims was the existence of 5 chambers located near the surface, just below the foundation of the Pyramid of Khafre, which is the second largest of the Giza pyramids. These chambers were described as being identical, multi-level rooms that featured sloping roofs. The design, they noted, resembled the king's chamber found inside the Great Pyramid. Each of these chambers was said to be tens of meters across and arranged in a symmetrical pattern around the foundations of Khafre's pyramid, all of them connected by straight corridors. Even more astonishing was their claim of discovering 8 enormous vertical shafts that plunged far deeper into the earth. These shafts were described as being cylindrical and apparently hollow, like gigantic well shafts. Each one was encircled by what appeared to be a spiral staircase or ramp, carved directly into the rock, creating a corkscrew-shaped void that wound around the interior of each shaft. The researchers pointed out that these spiral wells are entirely without precedent in all of known Egyptian architecture. The shafts were reportedly arranged in 2 parallel rows of 4, flanking the area directly beneath Khafre's pyramid, and were said to descend to a depth of roughly 600 to 650 meters. To put this into perspective, this depth is about 8 times deeper than the height of the Great Pyramid itself. Another startling comparison made was that these shafts would be twice as deep as the Eiffel Tower is tall. It was highlighted that if Khafre's pyramid, which stands at 136 meters, were hypothetically dropped into one of these shafts, it still wouldn't reach the bottom. The radar images suggested a helical structure around each deep shaft, which the team interpreted as the presumed staircase or ramp, and they likened these to legendary well shafts mentioned in ancient texts. At the very bottom of these deep shafts, the team reported finding 2 gigantic cubic chambers. The radar data indicated 2 side-by-side voids, each measuring approximately 80 meters by 80 meters in size. These were cavernous halls, so large that one report described them as being able to fit a cathedral inside. These massive cube-shaped chambers are situated more than 600 meters below the ground, positioned directly under the center of the pyramid complex. It appeared that all 8 of the vertical shafts converged into these 2 chambers. The researchers went on to suggest that these twin halls might function as central hubs. Given their immense scale and their strategic placement, they speculated that this could be the fabled Hall of Records or a similar legendary archive. Beyond this central complex of shafts and chambers, the survey also detected an extensive web of horizontal passageways that branched outward. This network of tunnels and additional chambers was reported to spread over a length of roughly 2 kilometers, connecting the areas beneath all 3 of the Great Pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. In essence, what Malanga and Biondi were proposing was that all of the pyramids at Giza are linked by a coherent, multi-level underground network. It was a notion that sounded as if it had been lifted directly from the pages of an adventure novel, yet it was presented with detailed technical graphics and supporting data. A conceptual cross-section released by the team provided a visual illustration of this claimed layout: 5 chambers near the surface, which fed into 8 deep shafts complete with spiral corridors, all terminating in 2 vast halls, with a further network of tunnels fanning out across the plateau. This model suggested that all 3 main pyramids were connected by these additional tunnels. These sensational findings were made public through a press release and a symposium held on the 15th of March and 16th of 2025. However, it is a crucial point that these claims have not yet been published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. The team had previously published a more modest study in the journal Remote Sensing in late 2022. That paper described their SAR microdoppler method and reported some hidden structural details inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The 2022 paper went largely unnoticed outside of specialized technical circles. In stark contrast, the new and far more dramatic claims of 2025 were unveiled directly to the press and the public before undergoing formal peer review. This lack of a vetted scientific paper immediately raised red flags and drew skeptical responses from many mainstream Egyptologists. The skepticism from established experts was both quick and strong. Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's famed archaeologist and the former chief of antiquities, dismissed the claims outright, calling them completely wrong and baseless. He argued that the remote sensing techniques the team used are neither scientifically approved nor validated for the kind of deep exploration they were attempting. Dr. Hawass emphasized that decades of previous geophysical surveys conducted at Giza using more conventional methods like ground-penetrating radar, seismic soundings, and even physical drilling had never found any evidence of such a colossal hidden complex. In his view, the announcement was nothing more than fake news driven by a desire for sensationalism. He rightly noted that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and so far, all that had been presented were intriguing radar images without any corroborating ground truth excavation. Lawrence Conyers, a professor and an expert in radar imaging at the University of Denver, also voiced significant doubts. He characterized the Malanga-Biondi interpretation as a huge exaggeration. He explained that satellite radar pulses are generally unable to penetrate dense limestone to a depth of hundreds of meters. Even traditional ground-penetrating radar used on-site struggles to see beyond a few tens of meters. Therefore, the idea of being able to see more than 600 meters deep from space strains credulity without more concrete evidence. Professor Conyers suggested that what the Italian team was calling a novel Doppler SAR method might actually be picking up other subtle effects or even noise in the data. He cautioned that they could be interpreting these patterns far beyond what the data truly show. Many geophysicists agreed with this sentiment, stating that the method, while potentially innovative, would need to be reproduced and confirmed by independent teams before its conclusions could be accepted. Other archaeologists pointed to the sheer improbability of such an immense complex remaining completely undiscovered through all the previous centuries of excavation and study at Giza. The bases of the pyramids and the surrounding area have been the subject of intense scholarly focus for a very long time, and numerous construction and conservation projects have involved digging into the plateau itself. One Egyptologist observed, "If 8 giant shafts and cathedral-sized chambers were really down there, we'd likely have stumbled on at least some hint before now." The fact that no known access points or air shafts leading to such massive voids have ever been found on the surface or within any of the known rooms is considered a major red flag by the skeptics. In media interviews following the blast Grand Axe announcement, Dr. Hawass went even further, suggesting that claims like these are attempts to undermine the grandeur of ancient Egyptian civilization by implying that there are great mysteries built by unknown means. He and others in the mainstream archaeological community see it as fueling pseudo-archaeological narratives. Indeed, the remarks made by Professor Malanga's team at their own press conference seemed to invite these fringe connections. They openly speculated that the underground network might relate to Nikola Tesla's ideas of wireless energy transmission and ancient power plants, or that it could correspond to the legendary halls of Amenti from Egyptian mythology. This kind of language immediately set off alarms within the academic community, which is deeply wary of mixing scientific inquiry with esoteric lore. Meanwhile, as one might expect, alternative history enthusiasts and media outlets leaning toward conspiracy theories seized upon the announcement with great excitement. The idea of a high-tech scan revealing a lost underground city spread rapidly across the internet. Publications like the Economic Times noted that these findings challenged the belief that the pyramids were only royal tombs and seemed to lend credence to theories that the Giza pyramids had a mechanical or energy-related function. References were quickly made to Christopher Dunn's book, The Giza Power Plant, which theorized that the Great Pyramid was, in fact, a giant machine, and even to Nikola Tesla's experiments with wireless energy transmission. A video produced by the alternative media figure Greg Reese claimed that the discovery vindicated long-held suspicions of a massive and sophisticated engineering project hidden beneath Giza. In short, the fringe community welcomed the radar study as a potential smoking gun that could prove that Giza's monuments hide advanced secrets from a forgotten age. However, until proper peer review and, crucially, on-site verification can occur, the findings of Malanga and Biondi remain entirely speculative. The research team has expressed their hopes of obtaining permission to conduct ground excavations in order to verify some of the targets identified by their radar scans. As of 2025, no such permits have been granted, which is not surprising given Egypt's extremely tight control over any and all archaeological digs on its soil. For now, the reaction within the world of professional Egyptology is predominantly dismissive. Without published data and independent corroboration, most experts consider the claim of a 2-kilometer underground complex to be an extraordinary one built on very tenuous footing. Still, the story has undeniably reignited the public's imagination about what might lie beneath Giza, forcing scientists and skeptics alike to address age-old legends in the light of new, albeit controversial, technology. While this heated debate swirls around these new and sensational claims, it is important to ground ourselves in what is actually known and documented to exist beneath the Giza plateau. The pyramids and the Sphinx are not entirely solid monuments. They do contain subterranean cavities and passages, some of which have been officially excavated and studied over the years. Let us now calmly summarize the verified underground features of Giza. The spaces that we know for certain are there. Each of the 3 large pyramids has known chambers that were cut into the bedrock beneath them or built within their stone structures. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of the 3, contains a broad chamber known as the subterranean chamber. This chamber is located about 30 meters below ground level and is accessed via a long, descending passage from the pyramid's north entrance. This rough-hewn chamber, which was likely an abandoned tomb chamber, has been known since antiquity. Higher up within Khufu's massive structure are the more famous Queen's Chamber and King's Chamber. More recently, modern science has revealed even more hidden spaces. Between 2016 and 2017, muon scans a process that uses cosmic ray particles to detect density variations identified 2 previously unknown voids inside Khufu's pyramid. One of these is the so-called Big Void, a massive cavity at least 30 meters long situated above the famous Grand Gallery. The other was a smaller, corridor-like void located behind the chevron blocks on the pyramid's north face. In 2023, follow-up muon radiography provided more precise details about this smaller space, identifying it as the North Face Corridor. This corridor is about 9 meters long and has a cross-section of about 2 meters by 2 meters. An endoscopic camera was even inserted into this space, confirming it to be an empty passage with a gabled roof, likely a structural feature left by the builders to relieve weight. Meanwhile, the larger Big Void, located high in the pyramid's core, remains unexplored, but its existence is accepted in peer-reviewed studies. These voids, identified through muon tomography, are significant because they show that even in the most studied monument on Earth, hidden spaces can still exist. However, it is important to note that none of these confirmed voids approach the vast scale of the chambers alleged by Professor Malanga's team. The volume of the Big Void is roughly equivalent to that of the Grand Gallery, not a multi-kilometer labyrinth. The Pyramid of Khafre, the second pyramid, also has its own subterranean system, although it is more typical of known Old Kingdom pyramid design. It has 2 known internal chambers, one located at ground level and another one underground. A sloping passage descends into the bedrock beneath the center of Khafre's pyramid, opening into a large, rough-hewn subterranean hall that is sometimes referred to as the lower chamber. This subterranean chamber was likely intended to be the original burial chamber, but was later abandoned in favor of a higher chamber within the pyramid's superstructure. There is also a vertical shaft in that chamber that goes deeper into the bedrock, which was possibly a test pit or an attempt to reach groundwater, but it is nothing on the order of hundreds of meters deep. No extensive tunnels connecting beyond the pyramid itself have ever been documented in situ. A recent thermal imaging survey of Khafre's pyramid, conducted by the Scan Pyramids team, did detect some temperature anomalies at its base. This led some to speculate that it could indicate a small hidden chamber or void near the foundation, but follow-up studies have not yet confirmed the existence of any new chamber there. The Pyramid of Menkaure, the smallest of the trio, similarly has a subterranean component. Its interior features an entry passage that descends to an underground chamber, a unique carved niche known as the subterranean pit, and another chamber with decorative panels located slightly above ground level. The British explorer Howard Vyse blasted his way into Menkaure's underground chambers in the 1832nd and discovered an empty basalt sarcophagus, which was subsequently lost at sea during its transport to England. No further hidden voids have been detected in Menkaure's pyramid by modern scans. One of the most intriguing officially recognized discoveries is an underground multi-chambered shaft tomb often called the Osiris shaft. This shaft is located to the west of Khafre's pyramid, about halfway along the causeway that connects the pyramid to the Sphinx. Its existence was known historically through local stories and a mention by the archaeologist Selim Hassan in 1933, but it was not fully excavated until 1999 by a team led by Dr. Zahi Hawass. The Osiris shaft consists of 3 vertical shafts that descend in stages. The first shaft, Shaft A, goes down about 10 to 15 meters to a first level, which opens into a chamber with niches. From that chamber, a second shaft, Shaft B, continues down to a depth of about 20 meters, reaching a larger chamber. This second-level chamber contained 7 side niches, 2 of which held empty black sarcophagi, and the walls had carved niches as well. This indicates that it was used for ceremonial purposes, likely during the New Kingdom or the late period, long after the pyramids themselves were built. A third shaft, Shaft C, descends even further to a third level, approximately 30 meters below the surface. This deepest chamber was actually below the local water table and was found to be flooded when it was excavated. In this lowest water-filled chamber, Dr. Hawass's team discovered a submerged granite sarcophagus with its lid pried open, though there was no mummy inside, and 4 carved pillars standing in the water. The chamber's unique design and its location beneath the causeway led Dr. Hawass to interpret the Osiris shaft as a symbolic tomb of the god Osiris, a cenotaph used for ritual purposes, not a king's actual burial place. It was likely repurposed in the 1st millennium BCE for Osiris worship, which would explain the later dating of some of the artifacts found within it. The Osiris shaft clearly underscores the fact that the Giza Plateau's bedrock does contain man-made cavities and shafts. However, these are on a modest scale compared to the recent, more sensational claims. The deepest part of the Osiris shaft, at around 30 meters, is tiny compared to the alleged 600-meter depth of the shafts in the Malanga Biondi model, and its construction likely took advantage of natural fissures in the rock. After it was fully documented, the Osiris shaft was fitted with metal stairs and was briefly opened to tourists in 2017, although visits are now very limited. A plan view of the shaft, published by Dr. Fee W4. Hawass, shows its alignment under the causeway and its 3 distinct levels. The area surrounding the Great Sphinx has also long been suspected of hiding cavities. Several small tunnels and shafts in and around the Sphinx are known to exist. In the early 19th century, the explorer Captain Caviglia cleared sand away from the Sphinx and noted a hole on its back, which is now called Perring's Hole, after the engineer John Perring, who also worked there. This vertical shaft on the Sphinx's upper back, just behind its head, was likely an ancient attempt to probe the statue's interior. It does not lead to any large space and has since been refilled. There is also an opening at the very top of the Sphinx's head, which is covered by a metal hatch today. It is essentially a shallow shaft, possibly an artifact from previous explorations or an ancient insertion point for an object like a crown. No deep passages originate from there. During restoration work in the late 20th century, another small shaft was found on the Sphinx's hindquarters, often referred to as Shaft D. It descends for a few meters but then ends, and it is possibly a natural fissure that was widened by seeping water over time. Additionally, near the Sphinx's north side, around the dream stele that sits between its paws, ground-penetrating radar in the 1992nd detected some anomalies. One vertical shaft or cavity, about 2.5 meters in diameter, was reportedly identified just to the east of the Sphinx, and another was located under or in front of its paws. These were most likely natural cavities or remnants of quarrying activity. Between 1978 and 1979, Zahi Hawass and Mark Lehner conducted excavations around the Sphinx and rediscovered access tunnels to several large, apparently natural caves directly under the Sphinx. These caves, which were formed by the natural erosion of the limestone and ancient water activity, lie beneath the Sphinx's body but were not finished or fitted out as formal chambers. They might correspond to some of the local legends of hidden spaces, but so far they appear to be entirely natural formations. Any external entrance to these caves was sealed for safety by the authorities in the late 1992nd. It is worth noting that none of these voids related to the Sphinx have yielded any kind of Hall of Records or significant artifacts. The most that has been found are things like evidence of ancient workers' tunnels or small votive offerings. The enduring legend, which we will touch on more later, is that a grand archive lies beneath the Sphinx, but officially, no such monument has ever been found. The official Egyptian stance is that the only Sphinx temple is the above-ground granite temple located directly in front of it. The Giza plateau is also honeycombed with shallower tunnels and tombs from various historical periods, although these are typically cut horizontally into the rock, not as deep vertical shafts. Dozens of rock-cut tombs belonging to nobles and high officials ring the Great Pyramids. Some of these tombs have short tunnels and chambers that extend into the bedrock. These are all part of the Giza necropolis, but they do not interconnect to form a larger, coherent complex. In modern times, several utility tunnels have been dug near the Sphinx and the pyramids to house electrical cables, sewer lines, and other infrastructure. Sometimes, tourists misidentify these locked service shafts as secret tunnels, when in fact they are of 20th century origin. In the late 1932nd, the Egyptian archaeologist Selim Hassan reported finding numerous unfinished shafts in the area. These were often just vertical cuts into the bedrock that would quickly flood with groundwater. He noted many shaft tombs from the Sate period, around 600 BCE, that were dug around Giza but had to be abandoned due to this flooding issue. This indicates that even in later periods, people tried to dig shafts for burials but consistently hit water not far down, which poses a significant challenge to the idea of shafts going hundreds of meters deep. The International Scan Pyramids project, which ran from 2015 to 2023, used modern, non-invasive technologies like muon tomography, thermal imaging, and 3D simulation to survey Egypt's pyramids. At Giza, their key achievements, as mentioned earlier, were the detection of the Big Void and the North Face Corridor inside Khufu's Great Pyramid. They also scanned Khafre's pyramid with muons, but, as of their latest reports, they did not announce the discovery of any significant voids inside it. One would expect that if huge chambers like those described by Malanga and Biondi existed, they would have shown up in these muon scans. Additionally, thermal scans in 2015 found a mysterious heat anomaly at the base of the Great Pyramid. 3 adjacent stones showed a higher temperature than their surroundings, which hinted at the presence of a draft or a void behind them. This raised speculation about a hidden chamber or passage at ground level. Subsequently, the discovery of the north face corridor, located just behind those very stones, likely explains that thermal anomaly. In summary, the Scan Pyramids project confirmed a couple of previously unknown hidden spaces within Khufu's pyramid, but nothing that resembled an underground city stretching across the entire plateau. All of the known passages remain within or just beneath the pyramids themselves, not deep into the general plateau bedrock. To date, no official map or archaeological report shows any evidence of extensive, man-made tunnels that link the 3 pyramids. Every known tunnel or cavity is local to a specific monument. Experts like Dr. Hawass insist that if something on the scale of the complex claimed by Malanga and Biondi actually existed, some form of evidence, whether an opening, a mention in ancient records, or anomalous subsidence in the ground, would have surfaced by now. Instead, all of the verified subterranean features can be explained within the context of known ancient burial or cultic practices. A pharaoh's pyramid typically included a subterranean pit, which was sometimes left unfinished. There are a few deep shafts that were used as symbolic tombs, or for later, intrusive burials, such as the Osiris shaft or the late period shaft tombs. And finally, natural cavities and ancient quarries pockmark the bedrock, and these are sometimes misinterpreted as man-made tunnels. That being said, Giza has certainly given us surprises before, like the hidden voids in the pyramids. Archaeology does acknowledge the possibility of undiscovered chambers or voids, but so far, nothing on the scale of a hidden city has ever been corroborated by evidence. What we have is a combination of ancient design, which includes the intended pyramid substructures, later reuse or intrusive digging, such as pits from the Persian, Greek, or Roman periods, and modern myth-making, which often magnifies these discoveries into something far grander than they are. Legends of secret chambers and passages at Giza are not new. In fact, they date back for centuries. Long before the advent of modern radar or muon scans, explorers, mystics, and local inhabitants in the 19th and 20th centuries circulated stories of venturing into the pyramids or beneath the Sphinx and discovering hidden spaces. Separating the truth from exaggeration in these historical accounts is a challenging task, but some of the claims are notable. One of the earliest accounts comes from the year 1817, when the British Consul General Henry Salt and the Italian explorer Giovanni Battista Caviglia were excavating around the Sphinx. According to later retellings of their work, Caviglia reported discovering tunnels that led from the Sphinx into the bedrock of the plateau. He allegedly explored a series of underground corridors and chambers that he believed connected to the pyramids. In one popular story, Caviglia's team followed a tunnel for hundreds of feet before being forced to turn back due to the fear of a collapse. These reports, however, were never officially documented with maps or detailed descriptions, and are therefore often regarded with considerable skepticism by modern Egyptologists. Nonetheless, Caviglia, like many others in his era, became convinced that a network of subterranean passages linked together all the Giza pyramids. This exact claim was later repeated by Colonel Howard Weiss in his influential 1840 book, Operations Carried On at the Pyramids of Giza, which gave the idea wide currency throughout the 19th century. It is quite likely that Caviglia had indeed found some cavities near the Sphinx, perhaps natural caves or ancient burial shafts, but the notion of a complete interconnected network was never verified and remained speculative. His findings were not preserved in detail, which left ample room for legend and myth to grow in their place. Even before Caviglia's time, there were medieval Arab chronicles that spoke of hidden chambers at Giza. A prevalent legend from Islamic tradition describes how a king who lived before the Great Flood, often named Surid ibn Salhuk, foresaw the coming deluge and decided to hide all the accumulated knowledge of his civilization in secret vaults constructed beneath the Great Pyramid. This story, which was recorded by authors such as al-Makrizi in the 15th century, essentially portrays the Great Pyramid not as a tomb, but as a repository designed to preserve ancient wisdom from a lost age. This legend is a clear precursor to the later idea of a Hall of Records. Going back even further in time, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, noted that the local people of his day believed the Sphinx was hollow and contained the tomb of an ancient king. So, the concept of secret spaces being attached to Giza's monuments has been a part of the popular imagination for millennia. Rumours also persist that major world powers conducted clandestine explorations at Giza during the turbulent 20th century. One such story involves a supposed German expedition in 1936 during the Nazi era. Some have speculated that the Nazi Ahnenerbe, an institute dedicated to researching ancestral heritage, searched for occult artifacts in Egypt. However, there is very scant evidence of any official Nazi digs taking place at Giza, although it is documented that they did visit other sites in Egypt, such as the Siwa Oasis. If any covert excavations did occur, nothing concrete about them is known to the public. Another tale is that of Project Isis, a supposed joint secret mission between the Soviet Union and Egypt in the late 1952. According to a documentary from the 1992, which is of dubious credibility, KGB files revealed that a team of scientists and military personnel opened a hidden chamber on the Giza Plateau in 1960 and found the mummy of an alien or perhaps an Atlantean high priest. This story is widely regarded today as a hoax or an urban myth, as there are no corroborating records in any real KGB archives. It most likely mixes Cold War intrigue with fantastical fiction. There was indeed some Cold War interest in pyramids, but it was more on the psychic side. The CIA and US intelligence agencies ran a program called the Stargate Project, which experimented with the concept of remote viewing the purported psychic perception of distant places. In the 1972, a renowned remote viewer named Pat Price claimed to have psychically seen secret rooms under the Great Pyramid at Giza that housed ancient machinery or records from a prior, forgotten civilization. One anecdote states that Price gave his CIA handlers the coordinates of several alien bases, including one that he claimed was located beneath the Great Pyramid. These claims, found in declassified CIA archives about their psychic research programs, were never verified by any physical evidence and remain fringe curiosities. In the 1982, American and Egyptian authorities did allow some high-tech surveys to be conducted. For example, a team from the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, used ground-penetrating radar and seismographs around the Sphinx. This project was notably funded by the Association for Research and Enlightenment, a group inspired by the psychic Edgar Cayce. In 1991, they reportedly found anomalous cavities under the Sphinx's front paws. This caused a considerable stir, but Egyptian officials then moved quickly to conduct their own drill tests in the area in 1996. They reported finding only mud and water, not an open hall or chamber. Conspiracy theorists have argued that these findings were suppressed, while officials maintain that nothing of any significance was there to begin with. Over the years, local Egyptian workers and some antiquities inspectors have whispered about off-limits areas on the plateau. Tour guides will sometimes point out locked doors or metal grills on the Giza site, for example, a heavy steel door set into the bedrock floor of the Sphinx temple, or sealed shafts located around the pyramids, and suggest that these lead to deep, unexplored tunnels. In reality, most of these are known tombs or service entrances that have been secured. Yet, this practice fuels tourist rumors that they found something and sealed it up. In the early 2002, an Egyptian geologist named Dr. Abbas Mohammed Abbas claimed that he was involved in a survey that found a large cavity 25 meters beneath the Sphinx. He said it was a rectangular space measuring about 12 by 9 meters and that it could be accessed via an ancient passage leading from the Sphinx's rump. However, Dr. Abbas's claims were not officially published, and the Supreme Council of Antiquities, SCA, did not publicly confirm the existence of such a cavity. This claim remains unverified. In 2008, a British researcher named Andrew Collins was guided by a local family to a tomb located west of the Great Pyramid, which is known as the Tomb of the Birds because of the bird mummies that were found there. Beyond this tomb, he and his colleague Nigel Skinner Simpson managed to wriggle their way into a series of natural caves that extended under the northwestern edge of the plateau. Collins touted this as the discovery of a lost cave system at Giza, perhaps the legendary Babylonian cave that had been mentioned by Henry Salt in the 19th century. He found large, natural chambers filled with bats and a great deal of dust, but he found no evidence of any artificial construction that would connect them to the pyramids. After his find garnered media attention, Egyptian authorities placed a gate on that tomb for safety reasons. Collins's discovery does underscore the fact that natural karstic caves do exist within Giza's bedrock, but again, it points to nothing indicating a man-made underground city. Aside from the files on psychic spying, Freedom of Information Act requests have not unveiled much about Giza. One interesting declassified CIA document from 1987, titled Pyramid Research, notes that an Air Force study was interested in supposed pyramid energy effects, such as the ability of small pyramid models to preserve food, which reflects a New Age fad of the time rather than any secret excavation. Another file mentions that in 1977, a joint USAID-Egypt project used radar and drilling to search for voids around the Great Pyramid, but this was for structural stability assessments, and they did not find any notable chambers beyond the ones already known. In short, if there were any earth-shaking discoveries made by intelligence agencies, they either remain extremely well hidden, or they simply never existed in the first place. In summary, many explorers and researchers over the centuries have claimed to have found or gained access to hidden areas at Giza. However, none of these historical claims have been verified by hard, reproducible evidence. They form a part of the rich and fascinating tapestry of Giza lore. Caviglia's tunnels from 1817 were likely misinterpreted natural cavities. The network of passages proposed by Salt and Weiss was purely speculative. Modern geophysical anomalies that have been detected, like those found by Schoch and Debecki in the 1992 around the Sphinx, remain either unexplored or are explained by mainstream archaeologists as being natural geological features. And the tales of secret Nazi or Soviet finds remain entirely unsubstantiated. Nevertheless, these stories have set the stage for why the 2025 radar claim by Malanga and Biondi found such a receptive audience. It resonates with 2 centuries of whispers and rumors about something huge and hidden waiting to be discovered at Port Blanc, Giza. and, as we shall see, those whispers often draw as much from mythology and esoteric lore as they do from any physical explorations. Beyond the realm of scientific inquiry and historical claims, the underground world of Giza has long been a subject of myth, legend, and occult speculation. Two prominent themes dominate this esoteric lore: the idea of a Hall of Records supposedly buried near the Sphinx, and the mystical Halls of Amenti, which are described in Hermetic and New Age texts. These ideas, while not a part of Orthodox Egyptology, have inspired generations of explorers and have profoundly influenced how new claims about Giza are perceived by the public. The term Hall of Records refers to a purported ancient library, believed to be located under the Sphinx, which is said to house the complete knowledge of the lost civilization of Atlantis and the true hidden history of humanity. This concept originates primarily from the writings and psychic readings of Edgar Cayce, an American psychic who was active in the early 20th century. In a series of trance sessions conducted in the 1932nd, Cayce stated that refugees from the sinking continent of Atlantis had traveled to Egypt and buried the records of their advanced civilization in a hidden hall situated directly underneath the Sphinx's front paws. He famously predicted that this Hall of Records would be discovered in the late 1992nd or the early 2002nd, and that its discovery would reveal profound secrets that would change the world. Cayce's claims did not emerge from a vacuum. They built upon earlier legends, such as the 19th century writer Ignatius Donnelly's work linking Atlantis to Egypt, and the even earlier Arab legend of King Surid, who hid knowledge before the flood. But it was Cayce who cemented the specific and powerful idea of a library sealed beneath the Sphinx until a chosen time. During the 1992nd, Cayce's prophecy gained significant traction, especially as the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis, put forth by geologist Dr. Robert Schoch, suggested that the Sphinx could be far older than mainstream Egyptology believed, possibly dating back to around 10,500 BC, a date which aligned remarkably well with Cayce's timeline for Atlantis. New Age groups and a number of alternative researchers became convinced that the discovery of the Hall of Records was not only real, but imminent. Indeed, when the Florida State University and ARE-funded seismic surveys in 1996 detected a rectangular, chamber-like anomaly under the Sphinx, it caused a tremendous stir. Some saw this as the first physical evidence of the Hall of Records itself. Egyptian authorities eventually allowed a small hole to be drilled in that area in 1998, but they reported hitting only mud and finding no open cavity. Nothing Atlantean was brought to light. Nevertheless, the legend of the Hall of Records persists to this day. It has become a modern myth, inspiring numerous books, documentaries, and adventurers who continue to chase it. As of 2025, no secret depository of golden tablets or ancient scrolls has been found under the Sphinx. Egyptologists generally consider the Hall of Records to be a fantasy, noting that any voids found under the Sphinx are likely to be natural geological features. But the allure of the legend remains powerful, and every new scanning effort at Giza prompts the same excited question: did they find the Hall of Records? Interestingly, the Malanga Biondi team themselves alluded to this very legend, suggesting that the vast underground complex they claimed to have detected could include the legendary Hall of Records. In occult and esoteric literature, the phrase Halls of Amenti refers to a set of mystical chambers associated with initiation and immortality, and they are often linked with ancient Egypt. The word Amenti is derived from the ancient Egyptian word Amentet, which means the West or the underworld. However, the specific and vivid imagery of the Halls of Amenti as a physical place comes largely from a modern apocryphal text. the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. This work, first published in the 1922 by an author named Maurice Doreal, claims to be a translation of ancient tablets written by Thoth, an Atlantean priest king, who, according to the story, founded the civilization of Egypt. In the second of these tablets, for example, it is described how beneath the Sphinx, or the Great Image, lie the halls of Amenti. This is portrayed as an underground domain where Thoth and other immortal beings go into a state of suspended animation, periodically awakening to guide the destiny of mankind. The halls are depicted as existing deep beneath the earth, containing advanced technology and profound spiritual knowledge. This narrative was eagerly embraced by Theosophists, Rosicrucians, and various New Age mystics. For instance, in 1936, H. Spencer Lewis, the founder of the Rosicrucian order Amorc, wrote a book titled The Symbolic Prophecy of the Great Pyramid. In it, he included a diagram that purported to show hidden chambers located under the Sphinx, as well as connecting tunnels leading to the pyramids. Lewis's drawing featured a circular temple deep underground, a secret staircase hidden behind the Sphinx's dream stele, and passages that linked all the way to the Great Pyramid and even to the Nile River. Lewis claimed that these chambers and tunnels were used for ancient initiation rites and that their knowledge was preserved by mystery schools. Though his diagram was not based on any actual excavation or physical evidence, such images fired the imagination of spiritual seekers. They effectively overlaid a spiritual geography onto the Giza plateau, one in which the pyramids and Sphinx were not just tombs and statues, but entry points to a vast initiatory labyrinth. Theosophical writings by Helena Blavatsky in the late 19th century had also hinted that the true wisdom of Egypt was stored in hidden vaults. Later, other authors like James Churchward, who wrote about the lost continents of Atlantis and Lemuria, and mystical teachers such as Omram Mikhail Ivanhoff, also spoke of underground retreats inhabited by spiritual masters located beneath the pyramids. All of these various concepts, whether called the Hall of Records, the Halls of Amenti, or secret archives, contributed to the popular notion that Giza's monuments sit atop a powerful underground spiritual center. It has become a recurring theme in countless novels and movies as well. But did the ancient Egyptians themselves ever mention such hidden chambers or halls? While no ancient Egyptian texts explicitly describe a Hall of Records located under Giza, their rich funerary literature is filled with references to subterranean worlds. The pyramid texts, which are inscriptions found inside the pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasties, though no complete versions survive in the Giza pyramids themselves, speak of the pharaoh's soul descending into the underworld, known as the Duat, and then ascending to the sky. These texts mention gates and caverns that the deceased king must successfully pass through. For example, Utterance 304 of the pyramid texts says, "Ho ho, you who open up paths and lay down roads for perfected souls in the Duat, open up paths for me, lay down roads for me." Lines like these indicate that deep, secret and hidden places were conceptually a part of the king's perilous journey in the afterlife, but they are generally understood as being mythological descriptions, not literal maps of physical locations. The Book of the Dead and the Amduat, which are funerary texts from the New Kingdom, likewise describe the underworld as consisting of 12 caverns or halls through which the sun god Ra, and by extension the deceased, must travel each night. In the Amduat, one finds mentions of the Hall of Sokar, with Sokar being a god of the underworld who was often depicted as dwelling within a cave. Interestingly, Sokar was especially worshipped at Memphis, the ancient capital near Giza, and one of his festivals involved a simulated journey through an underground labyrinth. The Giza pyramids themselves are sometimes thought to be a ritual representation of the path of the sun and the king through death and rebirth, even though the texts describing this journey in detail were written down later. From this, one could interpret that the Egyptians did, in some contexts, build symbolic underground halls. For instance, at the sacred site of Abydos, the pharaoh Seti I built the Osirion, a remarkable subterranean monument that resembles a massive tomb for the god Osiris. It is essentially an artificial cave filled with water, symbolizing the primeval waters of the underworld from which creation emerged. This structure clearly shows that the concept of constructing a physical representation of an underworld environment on Earth for ritual purposes was very real to the ancient Egyptians. If something like the rumored Giza complex actually existed, one might compare it to the Osirion, but on a vastly more ambitious scale. Setting aside all legend and speculation, we must ask a fundamental question. Is it geologically and practically plausible for a man-made complex of such a vast size, with 600-meter deep shafts and multi-kilometer tunnels, to even exist under the Giza Plateau? Several critical factors come into play here: the nature of the rock itself, the level of the water table, the structural stability of such a construction, and what we know of ancient Egyptian engineering capabilities. The pyramids sit upon a base of Mokattam limestone, which is a sedimentary rock. This type of limestone is relatively soft to carve, which is good for creating tombs, but it is also stratified and contains many natural fissures and cracks. The geology of the plateau includes layers of harder limestone interbedded with softer, marly layers. Over millions of years, the flow of groundwater and subsurface water erosion has created some natural cavities within the limestone, a phenomenon known as karstification. For example, natural caves have been found during excavations for the nearby Giza sewage project, and there are the aforementioned caves that were encountered directly under the Sphinx. However, these natural cavities are generally found at shallow depths, from a few meters to perhaps tens of meters deep at most. While deep faults do exist in the region, a depth of 600 meters would extend far below the known stratigraphy of the immediate plateau. It is worth noting that at a depth of 600 meters, one would very likely hit the main Nile aquifer or other geologic layers that are simply not suited for maintaining large, open cavities. The water table at Giza today is only around 5 to 10 meters below the surface in some places, although this level does fluctuate. In pharaonic times, it might have been a bit lower if the climate was drier, but it is still highly likely that any excavation below 20 or 30 meters would have encountered significant water seepage. The lowest chamber of the Osiris shaft, which is at a depth of about 30 meters, was indeed found to be flooded, clearly indicating that its builders hit the groundwater at that level. To dig a dry and stable shaft all the way down to a depth of over 600 meters in porous limestone without the aid of modern pumps would have been an astonishing, almost unimaginable feat of engineering. Continuous water infiltration would have been a major, perhaps insurmountable problem, requiring sophisticated drainage or lining systems for which we have absolutely no evidence that the ancient Egyptians possessed. If, just for the sake of argument, a hypothetical super-civilization did accomplish this, such deep shafts would almost certainly have filled with water or collapsed over the course of thousands of years, unless they were constantly and meticulously maintained. Then there is the issue of structural stability. Creating large hollow spaces deep underground carries a significant risk of collapse unless the rock is exceptionally strong or the spaces are reinforced with features like arches and vaults. The limestone at Giza, while decent for construction, is not granite. It can and does crack under pressure. The pyramids themselves exert a tremendous weight on the ground beneath them, and creating extensive voids directly underneath could potentially cause subsidence or structural shifts. Indeed, what we see from known Egyptian construction is that their builders were very cautious. Known subterranean chambers, like Khufu's subterranean chamber or the underground galleries at Giza's Step Pyramid complex in Saqqara, are relatively small compared to the immense bulk of the structure built above them, and this was done precisely to avoid undermining the foundations. The two alleged cubic chambers, each 80 meters on a side, at a depth of 600 meters, would be voids of a gigantic scale. It is highly unclear if the limestone rock at that depth could support the roof of such caverns without some form of artificial reinforcement, like massive pillars or extensive vaulting. Natural caves of that size typically occur in much harder types of rock, or are formed by chemical dissolution over eons, not by hand excavation in relatively soft limestone. When we look at the known limits of ancient Egyptian shafts, the deepest ones we have found are shaft tombs that go down roughly 30 meters. For example, some tombs from the 26th dynasty in Saqqara reach this depth. The magnificent Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid ascends for about 47 meters from the pyramid's base up to the king's chamber. The unfinished well shaft inside the Great Pyramid drops for about 30 meters. Nothing on the order of even 100 meters in depth has ever been recorded or found. For a useful comparison, we can look at the Derinkuyu underground city in Turkey, which is often cited for its incredible depth. Derinkuyu goes down about 85 meters at its deepest point, with 8 levels, but even this was achieved in relatively soft volcanic tuff and for a very different purpose, which was to hide a large population. Derinkuyu's scale is truly impressive horizontally, as it was capable of sheltering thousands of people, but even it is an order of magnitude shallower than the 600-meter depth claimed for Giza. So, to suggest that the Old Kingdom Egyptians quarried a vertical shaft 8 times deeper than any other known example, and then did so 8 times over, strains credulity to the breaking point. The amount of debris removal alone would have been staggering. Where would all of that excavated rock have gone? We see no trace of such massive spoil heaps around Giza, nor are there any records of their use in other construction projects. Could there be a deep, natural cave system that ancient builders simply modified and expanded? Limestone karst caves of considerable size do exist in Egypt. For example, a cave was found 25 meters down near Saqqara, but a depth of 600 meters is extremely deep for karst formations in this particular area. Typically, the limestone layer might extend for a few tens of meters before hitting more solid bedrock or water-saturated layers. There is also no known geological driver that would create a cave system 600 meters down at Giza. The plateau is not a karstic Swiss cheese like some other regions of the world. The deepest mines and quarries in ancient Egypt, such as those in the Sinai for turquoise or in Nubia for gold, were at most a couple of 100 feet deep, not thousands. If, for a moment, we imagine that such a project was attempted, the engineering challenges would have been immense. Ventilation would have been crucial. Hundreds of meters of shafts would have required a constant supply of fresh air, or the workers would have suffocated. There are no signs of any ancient ventilation shafts that go to such depths. The pyramids themselves have small air shafts leading from their chambers to the outside, but these are tiny and are not connected to any larger subterranean system. Lighting would have been another critical issue. The farther down the shafts you go, the more lamps would be needed, and with poor ventilation, the accumulation of smoke would quickly become deadly. We know that ancient lamps used in tombs left soot on the ceilings, but no such soot has been found in large quantities anywhere except in known, shallow tombs. And finally, structural support for large spans would require arches or columns to prevent collapse. The alleged spiral ramps might have served as a kind of structural spiral buttress, but this is pure speculation. If the Egyptians had built multi-level structures deep underground, we would expect to find some trace of this technology, like carved supports or archways, in smaller examples elsewhere. But we don't see that level of sophistication in any of their known subterranean works. Geologists and engineers, therefore, tend to conclude that while small, shallow voids and tunnels at Giza are entirely plausible. A subterranean city of giant halls and incredibly deep wells is extremely implausible, given what we know about the geology of the plateau and the demonstrated capabilities of ancient engineers. As the geophysicist Robert Schoch has noted when discussing such theories, it is far more likely that if remote sensing detects anomalies deep underground, they are natural cavities or simply variations in the density of the rock. A conservative interpretation of the Mallinger and Biondi data would be that perhaps they found some kind of pattern in the rock density or moisture content at great depth, but whether that pattern represents an actual void or just a different layer of limestone is a question that remains highly uncertain. While a 600-meter deep complex seems outlandish for ancient Egypt, it is worth remembering that other ancient cultures did create extensive underground structures. This context helps us to gauge what was historically achievable and how unusual the legends of Giza are by comparison. Perhaps the most famous underground city in the world is Derinkuyu, located in the Cappadocia region of Turkey. It was carved into soft volcanic tuff, which is much easier to work with than Giza's limestone, by ancient Anatolian peoples, possibly as early as the 8th century BCE, and was later expanded during Byzantine times. It descends to a depth of approximately 85 meters, or 280 feet, at its deepest known point, with at least 8 levels of tunnels, rooms, and ventilation shafts. Derinkuyu and the neighboring underground city of Kaymakli could shelter tens of thousands of people in times of danger, and they were complete with areas for living, storage, wine presses, wells, and even a chapel. This clearly demonstrates that large human populations could indeed function underground for extended periods. However, Derinkuyu's passages are generally quite narrow, often just wide enough for a single person to pass, and the ceilings are low. There is nothing like the huge cathedral-sized halls that are envisioned at Giza. It is an underground city in its function, but it is more like an ant farm network in its structure. Notably, Derinkuyu's builders benefited from the rock's ease of carving and the fact that it did not require extensive supports due to the relatively small size of the chambers. In contrast, carving chambers that are 80 by 80 meters in limestone would be an infinitely more challenging task. In Malta, there is the Al-Saflieni Hypogeum, an underground Neolithic structure dating to around 3,300–2,500 BCE, which was used as both a sanctuary and a necropolis. The hypogeum consists of 3 levels of beautifully carved chambers that reach a maximum depth of about 10 to 11 meters. It has multiple halls, including a so-called Holy of Holies room with curved architecture that remarkably mimics the style of above-ground megalithic construction. It is complete with carved faux windows and doorways, all painstakingly created underground. The hypogeum illustrates that even in the Stone Age, people managed to create complex, multi-room edifices below the ground. Its total area is around 500 square meters. But again, scale is the key here. It is a true marvel of prehistoric engineering, yet you could fit the entire hypogeum many times over into just one of the Giza pyramids. There are no long connecting tunnels, just a series of interconnected rooms. It also suggests that a tremendous amount of effort was required. Even carving out those few thousand cubic meters of rock must have taken many generations. Egypt itself has its own legendary labyrinth at Hawara. Ancient writers like Herodotus described a labyrinth near the pyramid of Amenemhat III in the Fayum region, which he said had 3,000 rooms on 2 levels, one above ground and one below. archaeologists in the 19th century did find a vast foundation and some remains of a huge structure at Hawara, which was likely a sprawling ground-level temple complex. More recent magnetic surveys, conducted in 2008 by a Belgian team, hinted at a grid of underground cavities there, which could possibly be the lower level of the labyrinth, but a full excavation has not yet happened. If the labyrinth did indeed have an extensive lower story, it could be seen as a parallel to the idea of large, covered halls. However, Hawara's labyrinth, even if it was partly subterranean, was not deeply buried. It was more like a story built at or just slightly below ground level, which was later covered by sand and debris. It was more of a basement than a deep cave system. The alleged spiral shafts at Giza have few, if any, known analogues in the ancient world. Spiral ramps or staircases were certainly used in some ancient structures, for example, inside towers or minarets in later eras, but in pharaonic Egypt, stairs were almost always straight. One intriguing comparison could be made to the well shafts found in various cultures. For instance, the well of Chand Bauri in India from the 8th–9th century CE is a huge criss-crossing step well that goes down about 30 meters deep, but it is open to the sky, not a tunneled, underground shaft. The well of Santa Cristina in Sardinia, built by the Nuragic civilization, features a subterranean, beehive-shaped well that is accessed by a descending staircase and is designed with astronomical alignments, but it is only about 7 meters deep. Qanat systems, which are of Persian origin but were used in Egypt's western desert by the Romans, have vertical access shafts at regular intervals that are connected by gently sloping tunnels designed to carry water. Some of these Qanat shafts can be tens of meters deep, and spiral stairs were occasionally carved into them for maintenance access. This shows that ancient peoples could indeed dig deep vertical shafts, but these were for water access and were very narrow, and certainly not 600 meters deep. What we learn from these comparative examples is that ancient civilizations did build underground when they needed to, for burial, for worship, for hiding, or for water, but their works were always constrained by practical and technological limits. The vast majority of known subterranean constructions are, at most, tens of meters deep. Only in very rare cases, like the caves of Cappadocia, do we see depths approaching 80 or more meters, and those are in very different geological and cultural contexts. The Giza claim of multi-kilometer tunnels located 600 meters deep is orders of magnitude beyond any known pattern from antiquity. Thus, if such a thing did exist, it would have to imply one of two things: either a currently unknown and exceptionally high degree of engineering skill or technology for the period, far beyond the demonstrated capabilities of dynastic Egypt, or a purpose that justified such Herculean efforts, which is another point of major contention. What would be the function of 600-meter deep shafts? Were they purely ritual, for storage, or something to do with power or water, as the Malanga Biondi team has speculated? In conclusion, the comparative lens shows that Giza's alleged underground city would be a true and radical outlier in the ancient world. Whenever there is talk of hidden chambers at Giza, it is inevitably followed by accusations of cover-ups and deliberate secrecy. Giza, being a national treasure of Egypt and a site of immense global significance, is tightly controlled by the authorities, which leads some to suspect that important discoveries are being kept from the public. Let's gently unpack these allegations. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority, which is now part of the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, does indeed have extremely strict oversight of all excavations. Unauthorized digging is illegal, and even accredited foreign teams must be supervised by an Egyptian inspector. Over the years, there have been instances where sites or finds were kept off limits to the public or to independent researchers. The closing of the Tomb of the Birds cave system after Andrew Collins publicized his exploration of it is one such example. The official reason given by the authorities was safety and the fact that it was already a known tomb from earlier surveys. However, observers with a conspiratorial mindset saw this as the authorities preventing independent exploration of where those natural caves might lead. The Osiris shaft itself was not widely publicized until after Dr. Zahi Hawass excavated it in 1999. For decades prior to that, its existence was only known from a brief mention in the writings of Selim Hassan. Some have alleged that Dr. Hawass intentionally timed the announcement of its excavation in 1999 to deflate the growing craze surrounding the Hall of Records prophecy. The argument is that he was essentially saying, "Look, we found a cool underground chamber, we've explored it, and it's just a symbolic tomb, nothing earth-shattering or Atlantean." Dr. Hawass certainly did use the media effectively to shape public narratives, but there is no hard evidence that he hid the find. Rather, he studied it and then published his findings in a formal academic volume in 2003. Dr. Zahi Hawass has been a lightning rod in these discussions for many years. As a prominent and at times blustery public figure, he often comes under attack from alternative authors who portray him as the gatekeeper of Giza. Dr. Hawass's views are crystal clear. He vehemently rejects any notions of lost advanced civilizations, Atlantean influences, aliens, or any other narrative that contradicts the orthodox historical timeline. He has called ideas like the Hall of Records nonsense and those who pursue them pyramidiates. In countless interviews, he has emphasized that there are no hidden rooms, we have checked and everything is documented. For example, when the new voids were discovered by the Scan Pyramids project using muons in 2017, Dr. Hawass at first downplayed the significance of the big void, suggesting it was likely just a construction gap that had no special importance, and he insisted that it did not change what we know about the pyramid's function. Regarding the 2025 claim from the Malanga team, we saw that he immediately labeled it fake news and stated that the pyramid is not a Swiss cheese. Dr. Hawass's intransigence, while grounded in his deep confidence in the established record of Egyptology, sometimes backfires by giving the impression of stonewalling or a refusal to engage with new ideas. Those who are predisposed to believe in cover-ups will point to how quickly he often dismisses new claims, sometimes without even examining the raw data firsthand. They recall how he ridiculed Robert Schoch's Sphinx water weathering hypothesis in the 1992nd, or how he antagonized the authors Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval over their Orion Pyramids correlation theory. To alternative theorists, Dr. Hawass represents the mainstream's refusal to look at any evidence that might challenge its established dogmas. To Dr. Hawass and his colleagues, most of these alternative claims are so flimsy or so outrageous that they do not merit serious academic consideration. This fundamental clash has led to mutual accusations. The alternative researchers claim that Egyptian officials are afraid of losing face or having to rewrite their history books, while the officials claim that the alternative media is full of charlatans who are misleading the public for profit. There have also been persistent whispers that significant discoveries have, in fact, been made but were intentionally concealed from the public. Some of the more credible-sounding, yet still unproven, allegations include the story that in the early 1992nd, a team found an entrance to a tunnel under the Sphinx, but the Egyptian government had it sealed and forced the participants to sign non-disclosure agreements. No names or documentation are ever provided in these stories. There is also the claim that in the 1972nd, a chamber full of artifacts was found deep in the bedrock of the Great Pyramid, but was quietly removed. This story often comes from anonymous insiders and lacks any shred of evidence or a published report. And there is the notion that Dr. Hawass and a select few secretly explored a tunnel that runs from the Sphinx to Khafre's pyramid. This particular rumor stems from a video of Hawass in 1999, where he is seen descending a shaft behind the Sphinx. In that video, Hawass is in a tunnel, up to his chest in water, and he exclaims that it's like a bottomless pit. He eventually stated that it was a dead-end shaft for water collection and had it refilled for safety. But alternative theorists suspect that he found more than he is telling. It is worth noting the difference between academic conservatism and active censorship. Dismissing a claim because of a lack of evidence is standard scientific practice. Actively hiding a world-changing discovery would be a serious act of academic and scientific misconduct. Most archaeologists would risk their entire careers and professional legacy if they found something truly revolutionary and then deliberately hid it. In fact, many would love nothing more than to be credited with a major, paradigm-shifting discovery, as it would ensure their fame and future funding. The notion that the mainstream doesn't want history to be rewritten is countered by the argument that rewriting history is exactly what academics dream of doing, as long as it is backed by solid evidence. As one online commenter on this topic succinctly put it, "I never understood the narrative of mainstream not wanting history flipped on its head. It would open up insane amount of funding and study." Of course, scientists are human, and paradigm shifts can be messy, with individuals who are heavily invested in existing theories sometimes resisting change. But a genuine, verifiable find will eventually come out, because evidence, over time, tends to speak for itself. For instance, the discovery of the Göbekli Tepe site in Turkey, which dates back to around 10,000 BC, completely upended previous views on the timeline of civilization. Archaeologists did not hide it. On the contrary, they are researching it intensively. In conclusion, claims of active suppression at Giza remain unproven, but they are not entirely unbelievable to a public that sees tight official control and a history of dramatic clashes. The 2025 case is instructive. The Egyptian ministry was very quick to declare the radar findings void. From the outside, it does sometimes appear that any alternative idea is reflexively shot down before it can be properly investigated. But from the inside perspective of professional Egyptologists, they see themselves as safeguarding their field and the integrity of a precious World Heritage Site from being hijacked by unfounded sensationalism. Both of these perspectives feed the polarization of the debate. To an open-minded observer, the best approach is surely to push for transparent, scientific investigation. If there's truly nothing there, prove it by conducting a controlled drill where the anomalies are claimed to be. The more that things are left ambiguous or kept behind locked doors, the more speculation and rumor will continue to breed. One aspect that is often overlooked in the more wild speculations about Giza is the cultural context of the builders themselves. How did the ancient Egyptians use underground spaces, and what meanings did they attach to them? Understanding this can help us to separate what is plausible within their worldview from what is pure fantasy, and it adds a layer of depth to why certain modern myths, like the Hall of Records, resonate so strongly with us. Fundamentally, the ancient Egyptians saw the underground as the realm of the dead. Most burials were located underground, whether they were simple pit graves or the elaborate, multi-chambered tombs of the wealthy. The Giza pyramids were the ultimate expression of this mortuary landscape. The pyramid complexes included not just the towering pyramid itself, which served as the tomb, but also crucial subterranean elements. The burial chamber was often located deep underground or at the very base of the pyramid, symbolizing the womb of the earth from which the deceased pharaoh would ultimately be reborn into the afterlife. For Khufu, this chamber was originally planned to be deep in the bedrock, although he later had one constructed higher up inside the pyramid's superstructure. The concept of a perilous underworld journey is evidenced by the pyramid texts, which were sometimes inscribed in the pyramid chambers to act as a magical guide for the king in the afterlife. In those texts, the king must traverse a hidden and dangerous route to finally reach the sky and join the gods. This journey could be symbolically reenacted by the tomb's architecture itself, for example, by descending into a subterranean chamber, which represented death, and then ascending through long passages, which represented rebirth. The god Osiris, who was the god of the dead and of resurrection, was strongly associated with underground locations. Temples dedicated to Osiris often had a hidden crypt or a special subterranean structure known as an Osirian. At Abydos, the Osirian of Seti I is a remarkable underground cenotaph that is filled with water, meant to represent the tomb of Osiris resting in the primeval waters of creation. During annual festivals, priests likely conducted secret rites in the darkness of this chamber. Back at Giza, the Osiris shaft gets its name because when Dr. Hawass discovered the empty sarcophagus submerged in water at its lowest level, he immediately likened it to the description of Osiris's tomb found in ancient mythical texts. In spell 151 of the Book of the Dead, it talks about the tomb of Osiris being surrounded by water, with the god laid to rest in profound darkness. The Osiris shaft essentially recreates that mythological tableau, and it was perhaps intentionally built or modified to do so by priests in the late period. Some have theorized, though it has not been proven, that Egyptian priests, or even the pharaohs themselves, might have undergone initiation rituals in subterranean chambers. For instance, there is speculation that the ceremony of the opening of the mouth, a crucial ritual which magically prepared the deceased king to breathe and speak in the afterlife, might have had stages that were performed in the depths of the pyramid, symbolically taking place within the duat itself. While no direct record of such an initiation taking place in the Great Pyramid exists, later Hellenistic writers like Plutarch hinted that the Egyptian mysteries involved being placed in total darkness for a period of time, perhaps in a hidden crypt, and then emerging again, symbolically resurrected. This could be a later overinterpretation, but it is a powerful theme that has been embraced by many esoteric schools over the centuries. In essence, the ancient Egyptians definitely built underground chambers for their tombs and for their rituals, and they endowed the subterranean realm with heavy symbolic significance, associating it with rebirth, judgment, and profound mystery. However, what they actually built, within their realistic means, was modest compared to the scale of modern fantasies. A pharaoh might have a tomb dug 100 feet down, but not 2,000 feet. A temple might have a hidden crypt, but not an endless tunnel network. The idea of safeguarding secret knowledge was certainly present, for example. Some magical spells came with the instruction not to be seen except by the priest, yet this knowledge was stored on papyri in temple libraries, not literally sealed in vast archives under a giant statue. The legends of vast halls under Giza can therefore be seen as a fascinating amalgam, part genuine ancient Egyptian symbolism, reflecting their concepts of the underworld and hidden knowledge, and part later, imaginative expansion by Greek writers, Arab chroniclers, and modern mystics. And so our sleepy exploration comes to a gentle close. We have wandered through the corridors of science, myth, and speculation, from the startling claims of advanced radar scans to the quiet, documented reality of the tombs and shafts that truly exist. We have heard the confident denials of experts and the excited whispers of believers. The truth about what lies deep beneath the Giza plateau remains, for now, buried in the earth and shrouded in mystery. It is poetic, in a way, that the mysteries of Giza have themselves become a kind of modern mythology. People from all over the world project their hopes and fears onto these ancient stones, be it the dream of a lost Atlantean archive, the blueprint for an ancient energy machine, or a coded message from the gods. The truth, as far as the evidence shows us, is perhaps more down to earth, yet it is no less impressive. The pyramids and their known underground components are the legacy of a sophisticated and deeply spiritual civilization, one that was focused on securing the cosmic destiny of their kings. Any new discovery will, and should, be examined in that rich and fascinating light first. Now, let the silence of the desert night envelop you. Let the gentle weight of millennia of history soothe your mind. There are no more questions to answer tonight, no more mysteries to solve. There is only the quiet, the calm, and the deep, restorative peace of sleep. Good night.